Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. I have a lot of updates to share with you guys regarding Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine, which has now resulted in more than 1.5 million refugees pouring into neighboring countries. And today, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has announced that Russia will cease all military action. They'll do it immediately if Ukraine agrees to four conditions. So the four conditions are that first, they must sign an agreement to never become a NATO member, never become part of a bloc in any way. So whether that be NATO or becoming part of the European Union, they want to keep them isolated. Second, they say that they have to recognize that Crimea is part of Russia. Third, Ukraine also must recognize that Luhansk and Donetsk regions, which are currently part of Ukraine, they have to identify them. They have to admit that those are now independent states. And a portion of those areas are Russian strongholds. They are kind of separatist from the rest of the country, but there is still a lot of Ukrainian support in those areas. Their fourth and final demand, though, is what I think is just a bridge too far. They're saying that Ukraine must cease all of their military action, and they basically have to demilitarize. They have to give up all of their weapons, essentially. You just invaded their country. So, yeah, I don't think that that's really something that they're going to agree to, and that's prudent. I know I wouldn't. The other stuff might be negotiable, but I don't think that that's going to happen. These demands, by the way, come as Russia is said to have violated 3 ceasefires over the weekend. They were supposed to allow Ukrainian civilians to have safe passage out of the country, and they were supposed to open up humanitarian inbound passages. But Russia is said to have violated that ceasefire, and they continued shelling, which did not allow for people to leave or humanitarian aid to get in. Russia was kind enough, though, to open up some routes for these fleeing Ukrainians to enter their piece of shit country or the equally vile Belarus. So you could go there, you just can't go anywhere else if you're a Ukrainian trying to flee this war-torn country now. And as you guys all likely know by now, Russian soldiers began firing at the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. It started a fire over the weekend. Ukraine was monitoring, though, the radiation levels, and luckily they say that they never exceeded safe levels. The fire was then later extinguished, and so they avoided a major catastrophe very narrowly, but Russian forces are now controlling that nuclear plant, and Ukraine relies a great deal on nuclear power for their energy sources. Approximately 50% of their energy is derived from nuclear sources. So, don't be surprised if we see further Russian attacks at additional plants, and they're probably going to hold these facilities hostage, as they are with this large one, and they're going to use this as leverage over the Ukrainian people because, they can shut down literally their electricity, their gas for heating, which is so important right now. I mean, it's still really, really cold over there. Russia also allegedly attacked a Ukrainian airport. They attacked a Holocaust memorial. And according to the World Health Organization, they have now bombed 14 health facilities in Ukraine. And remember, life goes on. Like, people there have life-threatening diseases. Women are pregnant and giving birth. Children are there fighting for their lives for other various reasons, and they're bombing their hospitals. And then there's now photos and stories circulating about Russia bombing residential neighborhoods, killing men and women and children. And as a result, Ukraine is now working to gather evidence to hopefully make the case that Russia has committed war crimes and bring them before a tribunal. And U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told reporters, quote, "We've seen very credible reports of delivered attacks on civilians, which would constitute a war crime." Over the weekend, Ukrainian President Zelensky spoke with the UN. He also spoke with U.S. lawmakers, and he literally begged for further assistance. He also told them, "This could be the last time you see me alive." And that's not hyperbole, because purportedly Zelensky survived 3 assassination attempts in just the last week. And they were thwarted, thank God, due to Russian whistleblowers, supposedly. Now, the majority of UN nations, including the US, is refusing Zelensky's request to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine, something that literally could start a nuclear World War III. But the Biden administration has greenlit plans for Poland to send fighter jets to Ukraine so that they can defend their own airspace. You might say, well, why is US giving, Poland the okay? It's because Poland didn't want to give up their fighter jets, because now they're saying, what if Putin invades our country? Now we're going to be down fighter jets. So the US is now working on a plan with Poland to, quote, backfill their fleet. So should they need it, they will still have the requisite number of fighter jets. So it's basically, we're just replacing what they're losing to Ukraine. That's, tiptoeing on the edge of our involvement. But now apparently, as far back as December of last year, the US started sending shotguns, explosive safety suits, rocket launchers, and they say other weapons to Ukraine. And that is according to a declassified shipment list that was obtained by the Washington Post. In addition, they say that the US increased shipments to Ukraine over this past week. We started sending anti-tank and anti-aircraft missile systems, as well as ammunition. The U.S. also announced new sanctions on Russian oligarchs and their family members. This includes the seizure and freezing of their assets, yachts, private planes, mansions, of course, bank accounts. And just today, a bipartisan group of Democrats and Republicans announced that they've reached a consensus on a bill that would ban Russian oil imports. It also would grant Biden the authority to impose tariffs on additional Russian products, and it would enable him to suspend Russia from the World Trade Organization. Now, we don't get a lot of our oil from Russia. It's anywhere between 3 to 10%, depending on what you look at. But other sources of oil are now in great demand by other parts of the world. So it's going to have an effect on us one way or another. Our gas prices have already gone up. They're going to continue going up. That's just the way it's going to be for a while. People are pushing for more drilling. I don't think that that's the answer, because in the long run, we are still dependent on oil. We need to get away from it. We need to rip off the Band-Aid and stop with our dependence on all these other countries because of oil. Otherwise, we are doomed to repeat this over and over and over again. And our actions or reactions are going to be based on oil and gas prices. And it's ridiculous. And in the meantime, we're destroying the world. We're killing the entire planet with climate change as a result. There's literally no upside. So again, we have to rip off the Band-Aid. We have to just knuckle down. If the government needs to help and give people financial aid while our gas prices are high, then that's what they freaking need to do. They've bailed out the banks. They've bailed out all of these corporations. They need to bail out Americans while this is going on, and while gas prices are high, and then move toward renewable energy, whether that means solar, wind, nuclear, as with other countries, but it has to be done. The other thing that this bill does is it imposes some of the same trading bans on Belarus. And that's, of course, due to their staunch support of Russia in this horrific attack. And, I'm sure that they're trying to send a message as well to China that, you better continue to sit this one out, or you're going to risk similar penalties. And so far, it seems that China is doing that. Even though they are Russian allies, they seem to be reticent to take a strong stand in their defense as like Belarus is. Of course, the bill will now have to move on, and it's going to have to pass the Senate and the House. I believe that it will. Unfortunately, our leaders are not necessarily leaders. They are followers of their base. And right now there is like 80% support for banning Russian oil imports. So that seems to be the direction they're going to move. The government isn't the only one taking action, though, because there are an untold number of private companies that are imposing their own form of sanctions on Russia, although they kind of don't have a choice because of our sanctions. They can't really do business with Russia anyway, but it looks good in the public eye. It gives them talking points. It makes them look like, oh, they're fighting, they're with the Ukrainian people. So major corporations like Nike, PayPal, Apple, Microsoft, a ton, pretty much everybody has suspended sales in Russia now. And credit card giants, this is the new one, and this is major. Visa, MasterCard, and American Express have all suspended their services in Russia. This is huge because for a couple of reasons. Not only will the citizens of Russia no longer be able to use their Visa, their MasterCard, whether it be a debit, a credit card, to make purchases in the country. No one can use any of those cards within the borders of Russia. So even if you're not Russian. And then on top of that, MasterCard announced that any cards issued by Russian banks will no longer be supported. I assume that means all of these wealthy people, all of these wealthy Russians who fled the country as this war began, they're not going to be able to use their Russian issued MasterCards outside of Russia either, wherever they fled to. But here's the deal. Here's the other reason why this is so important. China has set up their own version of Visa and MasterCard. The name eludes me at this moment, but they've set up their own financial credit card banking type of system. Russia is now moving all of those services over to China's system, which means that they are going to become extremely dependent on China and their relationship with China. As everything else around the world, as every other country, with the exception of some scumbags, has shut them off, has isolated them, they're going to now basically put themselves in a position where they have to have complete and utter fealty to China. This is going to change the structure of the world as we know it. Geopolitically, this is going to change everything. Financially, it's going to change everything. We are going to see some realignment in the global community. And Russia is in trouble because, like I said, they're going to be completely dependent on China for financial transactions to take place in their country. Because as we know, the ruble completely tanked. So even if people still have cash, it's not worth much. And they're going to be dependent more and more on credit cards, on lines of credit. And they can't use, again, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So they are at the whims of Xi Jinping and China. That could be a good thing, or that could be a very dangerous thing. It puts a lot of power in the hands of China. And however they wield that power is going to have global effects. It's going to affect the US. So we'll see where that shakes out. And it's again, not just large companies, not just the government, citizens around the world are taking action as well. There's an estimated 16,000 foreigners who have joined in with the Ukrainian army, and Putin has said he's vowing to, at the very least, criminally prosecute any of those people who are caught. He's also jailing his own people if they dare to speak out. As of last week, 6,800 Russians had been arrested and jailed for protesting the war. Well, then On Saturday alone of this past weekend, 4,300 additional protesters were put in jail. And Russia has now passed a law just this past week, which allows them to impose either a $14,000 fine to these protesters, or they have to spend up to 15 years in prison. But dissent is popping up everywhere because last week, a Russian businessman, he lives here in the US, he announced a $1 million bounty for Putin. Now, after having his LinkedIn and his Facebook post deleted, and there was some blowback, he came out. This is a guy, he lives in California, he's a Russian entrepreneur. He explained, look, I'm not saying I want to kill Putin. What I'm promising is $1 million to any officer in Russia who, quote, complying with their constitutional duty, arrests Putin as a war criminal under Russian and international laws. And then he went on to write, quote, Putin is not the Russian president, as he came to power as the result of a special operation of blowing up apartment buildings in Russia, then violated the Constitution by eliminating free elections and murdering his opponents. So people around the world, including myself, are saying, set up a donation site. We will gladly donate to increase this bounty. And again, this is not to kill the man, but this is to take him out of power. Also today, Anonymous, the hacker group, announced that, and they showed proof of this on Twitter, they announced that they successfully hacked into Russian state TV and they streamed footage of the attacks and the aftermath of what these Russian attacks have done in Ukraine. So that video was streamed, they said, on Russia 24, Moscow 24, Channel 1, Wink and Ivy, which I guess that's Russia's version of Netflix, that kind of similar streaming service. And this video contained a written message at the end of the video that stated that the war was initiated by Putin's authoritarian regime and not Russian citizens. And as you may know, this hacker collective had also disabled, temporarily at least, disabled the Russian government websites. So that was shortly after the war commenced. Anonymous came out and said, we are now at war with the Russian government. This is what we've done, blah, blah, blah. And it was verified. They had taken down some of their government sites. In addition to that, there's other individuals who are making their anger known. Today, a truck carrying communion wafers, of all things, purposely drove through the gates to a Russian embassy in Dublin, Ireland.
We're on a mission from God.
So, yeah, that guy wasn't happy. He let his displeasure fly. He was arrested, but the person who recorded it was cheering him on. So a lot of support out there. There were also 2 American men who were arrested last week. They had weapons in their vehicle and they had a Marine Corps sticker on the vehicle. And the men were arrested by the Secret Service. They were approximately 2 blocks away from the Ukrainian embassy. So there's very little information that they're giving out about this arrest or these arrests. But the men claimed that they were headed to the airport, that they were going to go to Ukraine to help in the fight against Russia. So we'll have to see. The fact that they were so close to the Ukrainian embassy is a little disturbing, makes you wonder if they're telling the truth. As of now, they're both sitting in jail. They've got weapons charges against them. But in the meantime, Russian moms are giving their government hell. In a video shared on Radio Free Europe, Russian mothers are heard confronting a Russian governor and saying that their sons were being used as cannon fodder. And then they asked if they were lied to. And while Russian state TV continues with their disinformation and their propaganda campaigns for Putin, their hosts are under siege from members of the public. Basically, people are fed up with their bullshit and they're letting them know. According to the Daily Beast, Russian state TV actors, and that's what I'm going to call them because I refuse to call them news hosts or journalists because they're not. Anyway, these actors are complaining that they've received literally thousands of calls and text messages per hour every hour from people either begging them to tell the truth, berating them about it. There's people issuing threats, threatening their lives, threatening the lives of their family members. And state-run TV actor Olga Skabieva, I believe is how you pronounce it, she said she has received, quote, endless photos of corpses, which they say are corpses of Russian soldiers. So people are sending her photos of dead bodies and saying, these are Russian soldiers that have died as a result of what's going on there. So, I don't typically condone things like this, but people are literally dying. Men, women, children are dying because of her lies and the lies of her fellow Russian propaganda actors. So, if it takes putting pressure on them, I don't say threaten their lives. Don't do that. Don't threaten their families. But, holding the truth up to their noses and making them look at it is not a bad thing. And another one of Putin's puppet actors complained that someone's paying for a mass phone blitz in the country. When Russians answer the phone, apparently, Zelensky's voice can be heard. They said at least it sounds like Zelensky. And this person then goes on to dispel all of Russia's propaganda about the war. And then they're also saying that there's this mass text message, push notification, and paper mail campaign going on. They said it contains, quote, horrors. Yeah. So they're questioning who's funding this whole thing. You mean, the reality check, you mean? Who's funding the reality check for the Russian people? Sorry, but if there's a GoFundMe for something like this, shoot me a link because I will gladly take part in it. Because as you guys probably know, Putin now has shut down even Facebook in his country. So people cannot get the truth no matter what. And one news channel that isn't going to be pushing Putin's BS here in America is RT America. They laid off the majority of their staff, and then they officially went off the air and said, nope, we're closing up. And they told their staff that this was due to, quote, unforeseen business interruption events. But then it came out that, actually, all of their distribution channels cut ties after their country invaded Ukraine and started killing people. So Dish Network, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, all these different channels, Roku, they've all pulled RT America from their platforms. Not too bad. We're going to miss them. We are going to miss them here in the US, aren't we? Anyway, guys, that's what's going on as of now. Things are changing. Things are very fluid. I'll keep you posted. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care. I'll talk with you guys soon.